The Flying Ox is a rare zipline roller coaster located at Paula Deen's Lumberjack Feud Adventure Park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. This attraction opened in 2020 and it has a unique ride system. Some may consider this a coaster, others may not, but the key thing is it's fun. For me, I personally consider it a roller coaster as it feels like a variant on the suspended coaster, and in this video I will review the Flying Ox and help you determine if you should try to ride it when you're in Pigeon Forge. Paula Deen's Lumberjack Feud and Adventure Park originally opened in 2018, but the complex received a flashy new addition for 2020 in the Flying Ox. This ride costs $2 million to construct, and it stands 80 feet or 24 meters tall, and it has roughly 1,000 feet or 305 meters of track. This is the second zipline coaster in the Smoky Mountain area. The first one opened in 2018 at Gatlinburg's Rowdy Bear Mountain, and each ride uses a radically different ride system. The mountain glider at Rowdy Bear Mountain has steel track for the entire course, similar to the design of the old Set Point suspended roller coasters. One of the most fascinating things about the Flying Ox ride system is that it combines the traditional thin cables you find on a conventional zipline with steel coaster track for a majority of the ride. It's really cool seeing these two ride systems blended together and the transition between the two. The mountain glider also has a lift hill like a traditional roller coaster, and it completes a full circuit. Meanwhile, for the Flying Ox, you have to hike atop a tower, similar to what you do for a water slide, and then you have a one-way journey down to the bottom. This is the same setup used in the Bat Chaser zipline coaster at Indiana Caverns, which I previously reviewed. The vehicle that you ride in then rides back atop the tower, using an elevator for the next guest. All of these zipline coasters require you to wear a helmet, but the harnesses are different. If you've done any zipline, you know the harnesses tend to be rather tight and can be very uncomfortable on your lower body. But I have to give credit to Flying Ox that the harness used here was about as comfortable as a zipline can possibly be. The harness had a seat built into it, so the weight was more evenly distributed. The process to ride the Flying Ox is a bit different than most amusement rides. In order to experience this attraction, you must purchase a ticket for the adventure park as a whole. That in itself isn't odd. When I visited last year, it cost me $30. But what was different was the setup. This may have been in place due to COVID, and it could change going forward, but I'm going to describe my experience. Unlike most parks where you can experience attractions in any order that you choose, you need to experience Lumberjack Adventure Park linearly. When you reach an attraction such as the ropes course or climbing tower, you have to decide right then and there if you want to experience it. You have the option to complete that experience multiple times or skip it, but once you move on to the next attraction, you cannot go back. The one attraction that has a limit on the number of rides is the Flying Ox. Due to capacity and popularity, you can only ride it twice. If you are primarily there for the Flying Ox, just know that this coaster is at the very end of the ride lineup. So if your primary focus is the coaster credit, you will have to bypass the rest of the park if you go here first. The rest of the offerings in the adventure park were about on par with your average ropes course, except they have a wooded lumberjack theme as opposed to the bright modern aesthetic you see in most ropes courses built nowadays. The park was taking reservations the day I visited, but Flying Ox still had a miserable wait. I had to wait roughly an hour for this attraction, and that was entirely due to this ride's miserable throughput. The zipline itself is a minute in duration, and then you have the cumbersome load and unload procedures. I'd estimate this ride has a throughput of roughly 30 to 40 guests per hour, so it is not hard to see how this line can quickly back up. If this is a priority for you, I would recommend getting there immediately after the Lumberjack Adventure Park opens. For reference, my reservation was roughly 3 hours after they opened. I ended up riding Flying Ox just once because I did not want to wait in that line again. Once you're fixed in the harness, the safety fence is lowered and you're pushed off. You start off slowly, but it gives you time to appreciate just how high off the ground you are in such an exposed ride system. I mentioned earlier that this ride feels like a suspended coaster, and that is most evident on the turns when you can get some wild swinging. From what I could tell, heavier guests tended to swing more. Now you don't get any swinging on the first turn, it's taken too slowly. But then you navigate this tight, downwards helix, and you start swinging. Rather than being forced outwards in one fluid motion, you keep rocking further and further with each swing as you navigate this element. But the craziest swing happens at the end of the helix. You then turn 90 degrees in the opposite direction from which you exited the helix, so you are violently flung to the side. You get pretty much horizontal with the ground, which is really freaky considering the ride system. You then transition from the steel track to the cable as you hit this extended straight section that bridges you from one support tower to the next. And this section rides much differently than the rest of the ride. While the steel track is rigid, the cable is able to flex, so you feel it bouncing up and down during this part of the ride. And you also get some residual rocking as well, so it feels really odd with all this motion. The ride bleeds off a lot of speed in this section though. When you transition back to the steel track, you slowly go around this 180-degree turn. You barely get any swinging due to the lack of speed, and then you reach the final element of the ride, the big drop. There are no stats for this drop, but I'd estimate it to be roughly 20 to 30 feet, or 7 or 8 meters in height. The drop is rather shallow, but you sort of rock side to side during the descent because of the prior turn, and it's one of the faster bits on the ride as well, so it is exciting. But the speed is short-lived as you quickly hit the brake run, and you're smoothly brought to a stop. This was a stark contrast to the brake run on Bat Chaser, where that was oddly the wildest part of that ride. The brakes on Bat Chaser were so abrupt that I was wildly flung in every direction. So what would I rate the Flying Ox? I would give this experience a 5 out of 10. The ride itself is probably closer to a 6, but it does lose a point because of how bad the throughput is. The ride gives some freaky views because of how exposed you are, but most of the ride is rather slow. The only really intense parts is that first helix, where you do swing quite wildly, and that final drop. Flying Ox is a really rare ride system though, and it is certainly unique, so it is worth checking out if you've never been on a zipline coaster. And it is especially worth doing if you're a fan of the other activities at the adventure park, like the ropes course. I have now done 5 different zipline coasters, and this one is probably the second best one I've experienced in terms of the pure ride. This one is definitely the tallest, and it may also have the most intense element with that transition out of the helix. The pacing is uneven though, but that is an issue on most of these zipline coasters. Last but not least is this a coaster credit. I touched on this in my Bat Chaser review, but I do consider these zipline coasters credits. Unlike traditional ziplines that travel in a straight single file line, Flying Ox has twists, turns, helixes, and even a drop. It feels like a suspended coaster to me. So those are my thoughts on the Flying Ox zipline roller coaster at Paula Deen's Lumberjack Adventure Park in Pigeon Forge. What are your thoughts on this ride? Have you ridden it? Or have you ridden any of the other zipline coasters out there? I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate if you gave this video a like, and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.